What is up guys, Chris here and welcome back to another Saxandson video. Now today, I wasn't quite sure what we should do in today's video. I'll be honest, I've been taken by surprise and not had anything prepared. So in the interest of getting something out, I thought I would improvise, and lo and behold, that's what we're going to be trying today. Improvising. Improvising is something I've always been interested in, and it's very hit or miss for me. Sometimes I can have a backing track and I just go for it and everything fits and it feels absolutely amazing, but then there's other times when I just cannot seem to get the right notes out, or I have a melody in my head and my fingers just do not do the right thing. So you know, it can be an amazing experience, but it can also be a right pain, and I thought I would talk a little bit through my process. Now bear in mind, I am 100% not a professional. I am in no way an expert at saxophone. I've only been playing for 18 months or so, so bear that in mind. I do have sort of a little bit of a musical background, so there's a little bit of knowledge there, but nothing extensive. I'm just trying to make my way and develop my skills in improvising on saxophone. So what I thought I would do is, I have a track called Misty. It's a very well-known chart. However, I've never really paid much attention to it, and I don't really know how the melody goes. You heard a little excerpt of it at the start. You may have been familiar with it. So I've got a backing track which has the sort of chords that go through the motions for that song, and I also have the head, which is the main melody, which you've already heard. So what I'm going to do is sort of look at that melody and then see how we can develop that into sort of an improvised lick, and we're going to let the backing track roll and we're going to see essentially what happens. Now, this is going to sound terrible. There are going to be some bad notes. There are going to be things that don't really work, but we're going to go for it anyway, and then we'll think back and look at what happens. So, without further ado, let's just start the Misty backing track. I'm going to play the head as I did at the beginning of the video, and then we are going to just see what happens. Alright, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Okay, that's enough of that. I'm not really going to know how good or bad that sounds until I put it all together in editing, but I feel like it started really strong, and what I was doing is sort of playing all of the safe notes that I'd seen in the head. So I'd read through the first line in a bit, and then I sort of took over from that and I tried to develop that. So sort of starting with similar notes but then making a bit of a leap. So that's a very safe way of improvising, I think. And I thought it sounded pretty good for a bit, and then I started running out of ideas, because when you only have a certain number of notes to play with, you don't want it to sound repetitive, but then you also get a bit afraid of adding new notes. So I thought I better spice it up a little bit and add some more interesting notes. So this is written in alto saxophone, C major / A minor. So there's no key signature, there's no flats, there's no sharps. Now there are accidentals naturally, but if we think about the key itself, there's not really anything. So we have free reign of all of the notes, but if we want to spice it up, we can add a few blues notes, typically the 3rd and the 7th. So what we can do is we can add, for C major, C, D, E flat, to just add a little bit of spice. So instead of We can go, and then we can do the same for B flat. Instead of, we can go. It just makes it a little bit spicy, but we also don't want to overuse it because then it becomes a bit mundane and a little bit difficult to listen to. If you bear that in mind and flatten the third and the seventh every now and again, you're going to get something quite spicy. The other thing I found was the chords changed, and because of my lack of familiarity with this particular piece of music, I wasn't quite sure where it was going. I decided to throw in an F sharp just to see what would happen, and it sounded bad, so I thought I'll stay away from that. But then I put another one in later and it still sounded bad, so I don't really know how to explain that. But I started to feel really lost, and at that point I started to just add random notes in, and I just sort of tried to find my way and it didn't really happen, so I stopped playing. I think to get around that I maybe need to think a bit closer about the piece of music and become a bit more familiar with it, but I also think I need a bit more knowledge about the changes and the keys. Now it stays in the C major key / A minor, but we do have a few accidentals that sort of pop up in the sheet music, so it does sort of indicate that things are starting to switch, and I think I need to be a bit more conscious of that when I'm improvising. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through the sheet music going into the B section, and I'm going to look at the notes that are working there and see what's changed, because the notes that I was initially playing that sounded pretty good and were pretty safe to me are no longer working over those chords. So something's new, something's adapted, and I need to make sure when I improvise I'm also adapting too. So I can already see there's a B flat and there's a random D flat in there as well, which I think will just add a little bit of spice and excitement to the piece. So I'm going to be sight reading. I'll probably play it wrong, but let's see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Really messed the rhythm up there, but that C sharp / D flat really sort of added a new texture and a new flavour to the music, which was somewhat unexpected. So if you could sort of adapt that and weave that into an improvisation, I think that would sound really nice. But we also had an F sharp right at the end, which was also unexpected. But hang on, I played an F sharp and it sounded terrible when I first went through the improvisation. So why does it sound okay here? Well, it is again all about the changes, because the F sharp lands when there's a D dominant 7th chord in the piece of music. So that means it's D major essentially. So D, F sharp, A, and I suppose we have a little cheeky C in there as well. But because of that chord landing right there, it allows us to get a nice tasty F sharp in there without it sounding really out of place. Now when I played an F sharp, I'm just looking at it here, the chord that was being used was F. So F plus F sharp equals not a nice sound. That sounds like this. It's those two notes being played together at exactly the same time, and that does not work. So I think for me, improvising going forward, I need to look at the chords as well and familiarise myself with them. So I'm going to play exactly the same section of the tune, but I'm going to look at the chords and try and work my way through them. And again, it's probably going to sound bad because I'm going to be trying to come up with a melody and pay attention to the chords at the same time. So we'll see what happens. Let's go for it. 1, 2, 3, 4. so it wasn't perfect, absolutely was 100% not perfect, but I kind of felt like that was much more in line with the changes that were happening. So for example, while we were on C7, I knew that I could add in a B flat, because that's what the 7 is, and I also thought we could add a spicy blues E flat. So it kind of was the whole sort of motif there. So in the next bar, when we move on to F dominant 7th, we then have to sort of change our approach. Now obviously the B flat still works because that's a note in the F scale, but you know, it's sort of, we have to then carry that F dominant 7th throughout 2 bars, and then we go up to F sharp minor 7th, and that's at the point when I really laid down on the F sharp and did that whole thing. And that, you know, because I knew F sharp minor 7th, we cannot go wrong with the tonic. Let's whip an F sharp right down there. It sounded amazing. But then we got B7, D7, E minor 7. So for there, I just kind of tried to play it a bit safer and sort of work with the tonic, the thirds and the fifths. And honestly, I think it sounded pretty nice, actually. And I can't really remember exactly what I did, but by the time we landed on the C dominant 7th at the end, I believe I was playing a G. So we went from D minor 7th to G to C. So yeah, I think I was just quite lucky that I landed on a G, which is a nice fifth of the C chord. But yeah, overall, I wouldn't say it was super melodic, but the way that it all came together was just really, really nice. So yeah, I'm really quite pleased with that. Yeah, it's just really fun, and sadly it does sound quite terrible at times, but I think if I really was going to go for it, I would try my best to learn the changes as deeply as possible, so that I kind of know where the piece is going, and that it becomes sort of subconscious. At the moment, I'm calculating the whole time. I'm staring at the screen, going, oh, tonic, third, fifth, oh, a 7th, let's put a flattened 7th in there. I kind of would like to get to a point where it's almost effortless and I sort of can hear a change coming. So like in Misty, for example, when I, you know, got the F sharp in the F sharp minor bar, it would be really nice if I could just have that in my head, that I know that that change is coming and I can kind of tip onto it, you know, so it's not as forced. At the moment it feels very forced and enunciated when I'm going into a change. That's because I'm literally making it up as I'm seeing it. Whereas if I was to hear the piece properly, but so it could be something like, I'm making up absolute rubbish at the moment. You know, I want it to flow and I want it to feel natural. And I think at the moment what I do is I stick a random backing track on and just try and improvise and see what happens. Whereas there's a lot more to it than just playing the notes of the scale, because you can get those spicy and really delicious notes out. It just has to be at the right time and the right moment. So yeah, there's a whole world of improvisation, learning how to play these pieces with your ear, and then you can kind of start to add things and make it a bit more interesting. And I think that's what improvisation is, just on a much more complicated scale with much more complicated pieces. So it's a start. There's a long way to go, but I am having a lot of fun with it. And I think being able to look at pieces of music and create something new out of it is a really nice skill to have. I just wish I was a bit better at it. So yeah, I guess that's it for the video today. Hopefully you've enjoyed, found it interesting, but yeah, let me know what you do to improvise, and if you have any useful tips, I'd love to hear them. And yeah, just thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a really awesome day, and I'll see you next time. Alright, see you later. Bye.